Beth Mooney, welcome to the podcast. You're Wisdom Cricketer of the Year, Belinda Clark medalist, hit number 1 in the world, multiple World Cups, Big Bash titles, and I can almost see you squirming as I talk about it. For someone who's literally at the top of the world game, you're incredibly humble, but I also know that you've had an incredible journey to get to where you are, and it's not all smooth sailing as it sounds. But before we get into all that, I'd love to go back to that little girl that started playing in the first place. So what are your early memories of playing sport in general?
Like everyone sort of our age, Barbie, I think my earliest memories are playing in the backyard as a little kid down in Victoria, where I grew up. Don't hold it against me, anyone. So I played a lot in the backyard. Obviously, Test cricket was on TV in the summer, and my mum and dad didn't play, but because it was just always on, in summer we'd find myself in the backyard with my older brother and little sister, who was probably too little at the time. So it was just my older brother and I just battling it out in the backyard, trying to bowl as fast as I could, trying to hit the ball as far as I could, and stay in batting as long as I could. So they're my earliest memories, and basically I just got into it because my brother played on a local team down in Shepparton, and his under 10 or 11 team was short one day, and I was about 8 years old, and my dad said, Bethany plays in the backyard a little bit, you'll just chuck some whites on her, and off I went. So ran fine leg to fine leg for a couple of years, and apparently I like that, so here I am.
Oh, I wish I could see some of you bowling your fastest. I reckon you get it down.
I might break myself now. I'm getting a bit old.
Was there something about cricket in particular that you loved? Like there's a big difference between running fine leg to fine leg and putting on some whites, and then that crazy drive that has taken you to where you are. So was it cricket, or do you think it was more part of your personality?
I think I just did it because it was, rather than sitting on the sideline watching my brother play, it got me out in the field initially. And then my family and I relocated up to Queensland to Hervey Bay, and I didn't sign up to a cricket team straight away. I played a bit of tennis actually, and then I sort of found out that you could play and trial for some girls teams for like zone trials, regional trials, state trials. So when I was 10 or 11, I just rolled into these trials that I knew nothing about, and made the Hervey Bay team as the wicket keeper, first time I'd kept, and then played in the regional trials and made the Wide Bay team, and then the Wide Bay team, we sort of went away for 3 or 4 days and competed at the state championships, and we ended up winning that year actually. And then I got selected to play for the Queensland primary school girls team. And I just remember after that sort of chain of events thinking, gee, this is really cool, just going away for a few days here and there, and then a week sort of in January down to Cobram Brugger. I think Anna Lanning was playing actually against me in that tournament. So just being away for a few different teams and making some really good friends, especially in that sort of Wide Bay area, really got me wanting to stay involved in the game and make those teams along the way so I could build all these lifelong friendships. I think initially for me it was definitely about that.
And you're obviously pretty talented then, making a fair few rep sides pretty early on. Did that drive or intensity, if you like, to continually make rep teams or continually perform, was that there right at the start, or was that something you had to learn?
I think that was something I had to learn. I sort of fell into it a little bit and got recognised and probably earmarked at a young age. But looking back, I don't remember being all that good. I went through a phase where I was batting quite low and just wicket keeping and just sort of got a job done. It wasn't pretty. So I never really was too focused on the outcomes or the results, especially when I was really young. And I was more just enjoying being around a good bunch of people and learning about the game and learning how to play the game. So, I think especially from ages sort of 10 to 15, that was probably what it was like for me. And then as I sort of moved through the ranks and probably got tagged with that awful word potential and noticed a bit more, that's when you sort of start to be a bit more driven by success and scoring runs and taking catches and things like that.
And it's funny you mentioned that awful potential, particularly for people that are talented really young, and it's, this is the big thing coming through, the potential. Then all of a sudden you're put into a state side, and you were 16 when you made your debut for Queensland.
Yeah.
How did you find the so traditionally, I know it wasn't super high performance when we were 16, but there is a lot more of a focus on outcomes, and you're this person with huge potential coming into a world of high performance, outcome generated, but the reason you'd played was enjoyment. How did you manage that transition, say from 16 to 20, if you like?
Yeah, I think it was probably a bit easier for me between the ages of probably 16 to 9, well, probably 16, 17. My first couple of years in the fire squad, I sort of, I was in the squad and playing only because Jodie Fields had torn her hamstrings off the bone, and Queensland didn't really have another wicket keeper apart from Mel Bulow, who wore the gloves a couple of times. So I knew I was only playing because she was injured, and I wasn't sure if I was going to keep my spot when she came back the following year. So that first year for me was probably a blessing in disguise in terms of not being so, I guess, succumb to success and outcome and scoring runs. I think I started that first full year I played batting at 11, and then by the end of it I was opening. So for me it was just a transition of, it's so amazing to be here, and then the start of the following year I probably, that's when I realized I had to really work hard and try and keep my spot in that team, even though it wasn't, like you said, as high performance as it is now.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's a fairly similar story where people come in for the first time. It doesn't matter really what age you are, there's that lack of expectation. And
Yeah.
just like riding it, it's great. I'm here doing what I love. This is great. But I think every cricketer at some point, or every athlete, hits that point where, oh shit, there's expectation.
Yeah.
Now I've got something to lose. So when was the first time that you started noticing that shift?
Yeah, probably between 17 and 19, I'd say. I got told at a really young age. I remember being about 13, sitting in the grandstand at Allan Border Field watching the Australian team warm up, and Jodie Fields was wicket keeping at the time, and the old Queensland Fire and Brisbane Heat coach Andy Richards just said to me, "That'll be you one day, Moons, out there warming up for Australia." And as a 13-year-old, I was like, "Don't be ridiculous! Like I'm not even that good. I can barely know which end to hold the bat." But I guess you can choose to believe the things that people say that drag you down, or you can choose to believe the things that someone else has a dream like you. They want to see you make it to the big time and do everything they can to support you. So it probably wasn't till I was about 18, 19. Jodie was towards the end of her career. There was probably a little bit of a spot opening up within the Australian squad as the second wicket keeper. I'd been scoring a few more runs in WNCL as well. So I had this idea that if I just kept churning out these runs, they would pick me. But at the end of the day, that probably wasn't enough, and it took me a little bit longer to realise that. So it was probably between 17 and until I debuted for Australia that I really had all of that hanging over my head.
That's really interesting. So if you had someone that young, like 13, if I think about it, that's the start of high school, saying that's going to be you playing for Australia. So while you're playing for Queensland Fire and before you played for Australia, was the majority of your driver like, I need to make runs so I could play for Australia? Or were you able to kind of fight through all that noise and make runs for Queensland in your sport and know that that will take care of itself?
Yeah, I sort of got to a point where my mindset was, if I score runs for Queensland and do a really good job there, then they're just going to have to pick me, because I knew I wanted to play cricket for Australia. It was just a matter of probably timing and getting all my, my skill set, my fitness, my understanding of the game lined up all in a row. And it probably was mismatched for a little bit there. I was so focused on just scoring runs and thinking that was enough that I probably neglected understanding my own game versus understanding who you're coming up against, and really nailing and honing in on that fitness side of things to make sure you're the best athlete you can be, not just the best cricketer. So yeah, and Bolts did tell me, so Bolts was our first guest on this podcast, that you have a pretty cool story about
2017-18 and you wanted to go play in England, and Matthew Mott sat you down and said, look, you can go, and yes, you're under your currency, but your fitness is a big problem right now. Can you talk us through, like, the big thing for me is how you felt in that moment with a lot of female athletes, and we talk about whether it's body image or fitness. How do you, one, cop that, and then how did you respond to it?
So I got my first contract with Cricket Australia in 2015, and that's when Motty got the gig as the head coach. I ran Drinks in the Ashes in 2015, and then I debuted early 2016, and middle of that year was when he sat me down in the middle of 2016. I'd sort of recommitted to go play for Yorkshire and spend the winter in England because, I'd rather be playing games than hitting balls in the net. So, and he sat me down with Sean Flegler and just basically said, look, you can't go. We want you to spend the winter here. We think that you can be one of the best players in the world, but you're not going to get there if you don't really try and focus a little bit on your fitness, because at the moment you can score runs, but you can't probably do that for long periods of time. And initially, like, it's, as a female and as someone that has all these goals and dreams in front of them, it's pretty upsetting and rattling to think that, the skill set that you're offering is good enough, but you're just missing this one crucial piece or element of your game that's going to help you unlock the potential that we see that you can be. So like any female athlete who is a bit stubborn and can hold a grudge, I think I decided that I was just going to, for the next 12 months, we had a World Cup in the middle of 2017. I played in the Big Bash that year. It was the second year of the Big Bash. Scored a few runs. We went to New Zealand, and then essentially I bought a road bike and was like, well, I hate running. They want me to get my 2K time trial down, but I'm certainly not going to go out doing 2K time trials every other day. So I went and bought a road bike and rode 50Ks a day, probably 5-6 days a week sometimes, and somehow managed to get my 2K down to 8 minutes or so when it was probably 10 minutes 12 months prior.
Hang on, 50 kilometres a day.
Yeah.
That's stupid.
It's pretty far. I probably do about 40 now, 3 times a week, which is pretty good.
That's still a good effort. So, like, I want to go into your mindset a little bit there, because that's a little bit ridiculous. Like, I know some people that love cycling, but 50 kilometres a day, 5 to 6 days a week, like, there's holding a grudge and there's needing to get fit. But how, like, do you think you are kind of leveraging a bit of a dark side, like, or a little fight in you then to actually get through that amount of physical effort?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I wouldn't recommend it. It's not healthy or stable or anything like that. I think part of my personality is that I probably get a little bit obsessed with things. Like, I wanted to play for Australia, so I got told I had to do this one thing. Then I started playing for Australia, and I want to be one of the best in the world. So, I often, after I stopped the cycling, I then often got told I hit too many balls, because I was trying to hone my skills a lot. But I think that there was an element of I want to do it myself. I hear what you're saying. I've tried your method and your running programs and that, and I just can't push myself to the limits that I need to reach the benchmark required. So for me, that was about, one, I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the hour and a half, hour and 40 minutes cruising along with my headphones in. No one could talk to me. No one could tell me I wasn't running fast enough. I quite enjoyed that sort of time in my day. Looking back, it was probably a good thing that the World Cup happened, because if I had kept going, there was probably no way I wasn't going to get seriously injured from the load that I was putting my body through. Because I wasn't just doing that every day. I was still doing my gym, doing my running, doing scenarios, center wickets, batting, keeping, whatever. So,
Right, so you were riding as well, so it wasn't just in off season. You were actually riding as well as most, like, full pre-seasons and in seasons. That is absolutely ridiculous. No, well, firstly, like, a lot of people will say, well, you got your numbers down and now look at you, you're best in the world or whatnot. And it's like, that's great. But I think we can both agree it's not entirely healthy method in one aspect.
No.
But at the same time, like, I'm a big fan of leveraging your dark side to a point. Like, everyone has one and we don't talk about it, but everyone has. And when it's a dark side, it's not all negative, sad. It's more so that whether it's a fighter in you and it's like, I'm going to prove you wrong, or maybe it's I'm going to prove myself right, or I'm going to prove. And that dark side, it's like, I kind of talk about 20-20-80 rule. So there is that little bit of ticker that really does get you through. But where did you, or looking back now, where would you draw the line between leveraging that helps you improve and completely unhealthy, this is not working?
Yeah, I think, there's an element of understanding of yourself as well, and how far you need to go. I'm a lot better now with managing all of that than I used to be. I think you're right. I think you do need to leverage that side of you that gets a bit determined and can only see tunnel vision, and you can't see the outside elements that might affect the goal that you're going towards, whether that be overtraining or under eating, or it could be not having that cricket life balance, things like that. But at the same time, I think for me, it took me probably, I was very wary that it was probably teetering on the edge of going down this deep, dark rabbit hole that I couldn't quite get myself out of. But at the same time, it got the results. And now I look back and think, I know what I need to do to get to an 8:32K, and I'm happy with that. I'm fit enough with that kind of 2K time trial with what I'm trying to do. And as long as I can run fast between the wickets towards the end of a one-day game, if I'm batting in the middle order, then I don't need to go to extreme levels to get that number right down. So I think as you get older, you learn to understand yourself more, understand what you need to improve and change and evolve your game over time. But when you're young and you've got this dream and goal in front of you, and you don't really see a whole lot else, which I hope that I'm helping some young girls work that out a bit sooner than I did.
And that's it. Like, I suppose some of our hardest times, the lessons you learn, you can then actually pass them on to the next generation coming through. But sometimes I think you almost need to let people fail and work it out themselves. But in that year or so, what was your mental well-being like away from cricket?
Yeah, it probably was. It probably wasn't great. I think I just became so fixated on sorting out my fitness, making sure I stayed at that level of fitness, all the while still trying to improve my game and score runs. That same sort of year, we went to the World Cup, and Bolts and I opened the batting together, which was amazing, and we got bombed out of the World Cup in that semi-final, which has been pretty well documented. And then we came home, and it was like embarrassing walking around because people didn't know what to say to us because we just bombed out and we were the favourites. And so it's almost like a few of us went into hiding when we came home. And then we played the Ashes, and I got dropped from the one-day side in that leg of the Ashes, and Bolts and I had probably got to a point where we'd just struck up a pretty good partnership opening the batting, and then Elisa started opening the batting in one-day cricket, which she's obviously done some pretty amazing things since then, so I can't be too upset about that. But for me, that was probably sort of a wake-up call that I'd maybe invested a little bit too much of my energy and focus into one aspect, like I had done with my batting before the cycling saga. And then obviously my cricket wasn't going too bad, but it wasn't going well enough to maintain my spot in that Australian team in the one-day side. So then I just started hitting lots of balls.
Well, that was my next question. So, like, you've pretty much put your life and soul into cricket, which is fine to a point, but probably cross the line into unhealthy obsession.
Yeah.
And then it's worked out. You're open to batting in the World Cup, had a team-based setback, but now the personal setback's there. So when you get dropped, how do you keep your head above the water? Well, firstly, how did you respond? And then secondly, how do you keep your head above the water to actually move forward?
Yeah, I wasn't a happy camper. I've probably said a few different things to Modi when he told me that he'll remember and he can share if he wants to. But I think, obviously there was an element of me that was, knew it was coming. But then there's also an element of like, I didn't really do a whole lot wrong either. So my next goal in that series was sorting out the test match and trying to make my test debut and hopefully become available for selection again in that T20 leg. So I was very lucky on that tour. We had a number of coaches who threw me balls at times when the girls were preparing for the one-day games, but I was spending a bit of time preparing for the test match. We had a warm-up game in Canberra, and I scored a few runs there in the test match and didn't score that many in the test itself. But then, the T20 leg was probably where I really sort of let myself go a bit with my batting and became a bit freer and scored a fair few runs there. And then made my way back into the one-day side through sheer number of runs, I guess. But the story behind it is my reaction was, I was pretty upset. No one likes hearing that they're getting dropped. You like hearing honesty and reasons why, and I guess ways that you can improve. So I did what everyone does, rang my best mate, rolled up to her parents' house, got a hug from her parents, and they said, right, get on with it. You got to force your way back in there. So I think for me, having that balance of people in my life that are a little bit involved and understand the game of cricket and elite sport, but they're not there with me all the time, means that I can, sit down, have a cry, vent, whatever, and then hear about what happened in their day. And a lot of them do really cool jobs as well. So, I think that sort of little period for me was investing in building some really good relationships that are family like to me down in Brisbane, and making sure that it's not all about cricket for me when I'm sitting down with them. And it's a really nice, refreshing way to spend a spare weekend or a spare evening as well. So I think that probably saved me a bit.
Yeah, perspective's huge, isn't it? It's like you forget when you're in the world of cricket or work or performance or whatever it is, that's your life, and you think it's everyone else's life too.
Yeah.
And I think it's so, so important to have those support networks that care about you and know what's happening, but still you can just go in and just have a bit of perspective on real life. And part of that is a process of what we call post-traumatic growth. And it's funny, I had a chat to Meg Lanning a couple of weeks ago, and she talked a lot about that 2017 World Cup flowing into the Ashes series as a big turning point for her and the team as well. And what ensued after that was unbelievable, in that you guys as a team completely shifted the way you went about things, adopting fearlessness and team first values, but you had your individual ways of what team first and what fearless meant to you. So on that aspect, what does fearless and team first, which are the Australian women's cricket team's values, mean to you?
Yeah, I think, Meg's obviously spot on. We had a huge turning point there. So going into that sort of March 2018 series in India, we had some one days and a T20 tri series. For me, it was about enjoying the experience of playing, because you never know when your last game is going to be. I obviously had been dropped. You don't know when your time's up. Some of us don't get to choose that unless we're, the Virat Kohlis and the Elise Perrys of the game, where we're just modern day heroes that people want to watch play. But for me, it was about enjoying it and not being afraid of the challenge that was in front of us, regardless of whatever context of the game I'd walked into. So I remember there was there's actually a photo. It's a great photo. It was like the last game of one of the last games of the Tri Series. There's me and Junior out there batting in the middle in Mumbai, and it was stifling hot. And we had like 100 and something run partnership in this T20, and we're just absolutely cooked. It was the end of the summer, and for me, that's team first. Like you're battling out there in the middle. But both you and your partner are absolutely cooked, but you just sort of find a way to get your team in the best position possible, and so you have to be brave to do that as well. So adopting that sort of attitude makes it a lot easier to go through the gritty and sometimes not that pretty parts of the game that you sort of see. And winning ugly is probably a mentality that I like to talk about within teams. Is it's not always going to be rosy. You just got to get the job done, no matter what it looks like.
Yeah, and courage is so important, and I think there's probably an element of courage to let go of everything in the past. So whether it's let go of your expectations, let go of the need to prove yourself over and over again, and you certainly found a way to do that, because I found a fun fact that between 2017 and 2020, you've scored more 2020 international runs than anyone in the world of either sex. So there's a fun fact for you.
Thank you.
It's clearly like there's been a shift for you as well, with the fearlessness, the team first, buying into team values. But I also want to know, like, more personally, in terms of your batting, what did you feel shifted when you were out there in the middle making a shit ton of runs?
I think probably just belief in the work that I'd done. There's no secret method to it. It's just I used to hit a lot of balls, and I'm probably a bit of an enigma when it comes to cricket and preparing for a game, because you win the toss and bat first, and it's a T20. I'm opening the batting, and the top 5 or 6 walk out and face some throwdowns. But you'll never see me out there doing that. The first ball I hit on the day of a game is the ball that I face in the middle, which is usually a shock to most people, because they're like, well, what happens if you're not concentrating or paying attention? And my theory there is, if I've done the work the right way during the week, then I shouldn't have to hit a ball before I walk out into the middle, because it's too late to be prepared then. And I probably just believed in that sort of method a little bit more during those years. And even if I felt like some people were questioning it, I stuck with it and believed that the work I'd done, as long as it was consistent and had a purpose during the week and during the preseason, then whatever happened out in the middle would take care of itself. And I wasn't as fixated on the outcome of that as I was making sure I was consistently well prepared and was never too up or too down with how the result actually panned out, as long as I'd done the right thing during the week before.
And being able to manage your emotions in terms of not getting too up, too down, and combining that with focus in the middle. So you're out there and you said, well, I'm switched on for ball 1. I don't need to hit 50 balls before the game. How do you manage your mind and control your focus in terms of whether it's a pre-ball routine? Is there something specific that you do to stay in the moment?
No, I probably make sure, I sort of tap my bat once before I put my feet on the crease and shuffle my thigh pad around a bit, and tap. I don't really have a backlist. I just tap my bat when the bowler lets the ball go. So I'm a bit strange in terms of my setup and how I go about it. But I think for me, it's just that belief in the work that I'd done leading up to that particular moment, whether it's the first ball I've faced or the 50th ball I've faced. If I've done the same thing, then the rest will take care of it. And that probably helps me not get too, I guess, anxious or nervous about, a game that we're trying to play, and not too, down about a game we're about to play, either if it's against, if it's against a team that we don't know that well, So Bangladesh in the World Cup in 2020, we didn't know that well, and that was probably a blessing in disguise because we couldn't really be too fixated on what they were going to do to us because we hadn't seen a lot of them. Whereas you could be so well prepared and planned for a team like New Zealand because a lot of them play in the Big Bash, and obviously we play a lot of cricket against them. But at the end of the day, if you're not doing your job the best you can and you're too busy worrying about what they're trying to do, then and that's what probably gets you undone. So I guess that probably helps me have a really clear mind when I walk out there, is knowing I've been consistent in my preparation and left no stone unturned.
And how are you able to manage that when you're really under the pump? So do you think you're really... So a couple of examples that come to me, and both are fairly different, is I remember watching you, I think it was WBBL 04, when you were sick and were literally dry itching in the field and you looked in all sorts, yet you won the game for the team. So one's like a physical pressure, as well as being a final. And the other side of it is obviously the T20 World Cup in Melbourne, the MCG. You're walking in front of 87,000 people, and not so much physical, but that's just an incredible situation that, in a positive way, but it's still noise and a lot of distractions away from your job, which is to score runs.
Good questions. I think the WBBL 04 final, I sort of I wasn't feeling well even in the fielding innings. I obviously, it was wicket keeping, had my helmet on the whole time, and I remember not feeling well before we'd even started. So I'd walked into the change room and took my gear off and just thought, oh well, we're only chasing 130. I'll just try and tee off, and someone else will get the job done. It doesn't have to be me today. I'm okay with that. Which you should never say, even in your mind or out loud in cricket, because it never works out that way. But we obviously lost a couple of early wickets, and whilst we were under the pump, I think there's been a lot documented about Kirby Short and the way she led the Brisbane Heat in her time playing and captaining. So to see someone like her walk out, who we have very similar morals and values and a lot of alignment in the way that we go about our business, made sort of a calming and relaxing influence in what was a very tense situation. But I guess for me, it was about just, I remember saying to her, like, if there's going to be two people out here to win a game for this team in this situation, who would you bet your money on? And, the answer was her and I. So in that scenario, when I wasn't feeling well, just having someone out there who's one of my people and someone I consider family, it actually didn't feel like a final. It just felt like I was out there doing the best job in the world with someone who'd been part of all the highs and lows we've just talked about in my career, and then being able to experience that with her and getting our team over the line. So I think there are a few expletives in there every now and then about, we're not effing losing this game. I don't care if I'm passing out. I also might have told her I loved her when she hit a 4 because I was running. But just those sort of moments that I reflect on, and I think they're things people don't talk about. You never get to experience, well, unless you're one of the lucky ones like you and I, Barbie. It's rare that you get to experience days like that with some of your best mates. So whilst it was high pressure and a lot riding on it, it didn't really feel like that at the time. And then similarly, the World Cup final for us as an Australian team, it was just a deep breath, sigh of relief that we actually got there, because we were riding a roller coaster of emotion up to that day. So I remember walking through the city in Melbourne the day of the final, and people walking past telling me good luck. I was just in normal clothes, and I remember saying to my sister and a couple of my mates and Kirby even, I said, I think Midge is going to have a day out. And I sort of subconsciously deflected my own performance onto someone else to take my mind off the fact that I had to do a job. I was sort of probably doing that a little bit, and then just walking out there, it was so surreal and just an experience that I never dreamt would happen in my lifetime of my career. So it was actually quite easy to just soak it up, have fun, enjoy what was in front of us, and then you only have to concentrate for 5 or 6 seconds every time someone bowls a ball at you. And then when I'm at the other end, I can watch Midge absolutely tee off and do her thing and listen to the crowd. So it's probably lucky she faced a few more balls than I did that game early doors, because she nailed it.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. And I like, to be honest, your innings in that final actually stood out to me the most, because everyone was talking about Midge going nuts and she's hitting six and like really took it on early. But then I remember looking at probably reports from the game as well after, and I saw your numbers and wouldn't have had a clue that you were going at like 160, I think. Scored 70 odd or 40. And it was like the fact that you were able to put those numbers out in an incredible situation. And it almost summed you up. It's like no fuss, but gritty, focused, and like really classy cricket. And it was something that, like, we've probably kind of come through the ranks at the same time. And to see that, I was like, that's it. I don't know. It was just one of the best things I've ever seen. And it was just like a full circle seeing you kind of grow up through the ranks. And the other part was Kirby Short, and I really want to pick on that a bit because I've not heard a single bad word about her leadership. She sounds like an incredible person, an incredible leader. What is it that you really connect to her about?
I think, just as I said before, I've been very lucky to play a lot of cricket with Kirby from when I was about 16. I think I crossed paths with her, but it probably wasn't until about 2017 that we started being really good friends and realizing how aligned we were with what we believed in, and the way we wanted to go about cricket and life and leadership and that kind of stuff. So for me, she just exudes genuine, um, just she's just one of the most genuine people you'll ever come across. There's no motive behind anything she does other than, she really cares about everyone she crosses paths with. She asks a lot of questions, and they're never questions just to know things, which, in any part of the world, you'll any job, you'll hear people just asking because they want to know something. But she genuinely asks questions to understand who she's dealing with and what makes them tick, and she loves learning about people, and she never uses it against anyone. She sort of uses it to build a good relationship with whoever's in front of her. And the other thing is with her, she had a very testing career here at Queensland Cricket, and made the most of what she had, and I guess some not so great times as well. So the way she handled those moments with such poise and character is something that really stood out for me as a leader and as a friend as well. I think they're the people that you want sitting next to you, or sitting in the MCG watching a final, or helping you not spew up in the middle of a WBBL final. So yeah, I'm with you. I've not ever heard a bad word said about her, and I think the game will be lost if she's not. The game will lose a lot if she's not involved.
On the flip side, I'm sure you've come across some leaders or coaches that you haven't quite clicked with. You don't have to mention who they are, but what was it about them that didn't work for you, and what would you prefer, or what would you prefer that they give to you instead?
Yeah, it's part of life. You're never going to get on with everyone, and personalities clash and things like that. I think the times when it hasn't really worked have been when people sort of talk at you, and don't really ask questions. They more tell, rather than ask to understand. One of my pet hates is people interrupting you and talking over the top of you. And the second anyone does that to me, I'm like, nah, you're gone. So I think, especially in the female game, you've probably got to listen a lot more than you talk to begin with, because girls obviously feel valued when they feel understood. And the second that they don't feel understood or heard, that's when they don't feel valued, and you never get the best out of them. So I think, as more and more coaches get involved in the women's game, especially because of how far it's moving along, I think any advice I'd give to a coach is ask more than you tell, and listen more than you talk, because you'll actually learn a lot more by doing that, and how to get the best out of your athlete if you just invest a little bit of time there early doors, and then it becomes a collaborative approach, not a telling.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like your relationships and your direct support network are really crucial to your resilience plan, or just getting through and going after your goals. Do you also lean on things like podcasts, books? And if so, do you have any go-tos that you'd really recommend for people to listen into?
I haven't really got on the podcast train too much lately, but I do like my reading, and often get sprayed a little bit when we go on tour with the Aussie team, because I'm the idiot that carries 6 books with me, because I refuse to buy one of those ebook things, because I like turning the page. So I really enjoyed reading Hugh Van Cuylenberg's Resilience Project. That's an absolute cracker. I sort of flip between fiction and non-fiction. Um, there's a couple of fiction books out there that are pretty good. A Little Life is one I'm going through at the moment. It's got a few different stories intertwined into it.
With Hugh Van Cuylenberg's book, The Resilience Project, he talks a lot about the 3 things of gratitude, empathy, and mindfulness. Do you practice those regularly?
Not particularly. I think the gratitude thing is an easy one for me, just based on the people I interact with day to day. They ask good questions. We're never afraid to share how we feel or what we're thinking, or things like that. So the gratitude one is probably something that comes a bit easier to me, just in terms of the nature of the people I interact with, and how amazing they are. The empathy thing, I think, my experiences in life and in cricket probably help me do that a little bit more, even though some people will say I'm not overly empathetic. And then the mindfulness it's for some people, it's not for some people, and I just can't sit still. So my version of mindfulness is taking the dog for a walk in the mornings or in the evenings, and just being by myself for an hour and a bit, and in my own thoughts. So I think it's certainly got a place in the world, and Hugh's been doing a wonderful job educating people on all of that.
Yeah, and the one thing I really like, despite the gratitude, empathy, mindfulness, is the perspective shift he creates with the stories that he tells. And like for me, that was probably the most powerful thing. It was like it just almost hits you in the face with a brick, and it's like, oh wow, okay, there's a whole different world out there. And actually acknowledging that and being open to that naturally brings the resilience and brings your gratitude and your empathy, because you can start to connect with others a little bit better.
Definitely.
And so last few questions that we ask most of the guests that come on. So what do you hope that the next generation gets right?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I hope the next generation, not that ours hasn't probably got it right, but I really do hope the next generation understands how lucky they are to do what they do. Obviously, we came through an era where we weren't getting paid a whole lot. We're only playing a handful of games a year. Wasn't really broadcast on TV, and now these girls are going to fall into the sport at a young age that's fully professional. They're on TV from a young age. It's not getting too lost in why you started the game. I think that's really important, especially for those girls coming through the next generation. Is always remember why you started, because you'll get a lot further than if you just focused on the next thing that's coming your way, and the next media deal or whatever else it might be, the next contract. So I hope that generation doesn't lose sight of those things that are really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things, talk about the dark side of the high performance cultures. So the 90% of it's great. Like there's more money, you can do what you love, the TV's on, like it's great. But the dark side of high performance is that, hang on, can we maintain that little girl and the love of the game and that joy in the game? And that's probably where a lot of the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing is trying to bring back that enjoyment, but still have that drive, have that high performance, have that dark side, let yourself go and pursue these dreams, but still hold on to that original love of the game. So speaking of high performance, how would you define high performance?
I think just a consistent level of elite that not many people reach. If you're a high performance athlete in whatever sport, obviously you're in the minority. And to do that, you have to be really consistent at what you do. Not just good, you have to be consistent. So high performance would be that to me. And it's having goals and achieving them, but being, I guess, looking back and looking at what you've achieved and being proud of it too. Obviously, I get a bit squirmy when people tell me things because sometimes I forget, but it doesn't mean it's not nice to remember all the things you've done and how consistent you've been, but always having an eye to getting better and improving all the time.
And if you fast forward a few years and you're looking back on your career, how would you define it as being as successful as possible?
I think just have probably now more than ever is having a really positive influence on the next tier of players coming through. For me, that's probably what success looks like now. I think, it's really nice to play in World Cups and Ashes campaigns, and of course, I want to win in all of those and play in all of those and stay in the Australian team as long as I can. That's an absolute given. But if I can somehow help some of the young girls coming through learn a little bit from my mistakes a bit earlier and get them in the game and keep them in the game for a lot longer, then I feel like I've had a pretty good impact on the game, which is success for me. I think you've got to make sure you're always evolving the game as much as you can.
If I asked you what success was when you were a 21-year-old new on the scene, do you think that would have been fairly different?
Oh yeah, I would have just said play one game for Australia because I didn't think I was going to play any.
And that's kind of it, isn't it? Like you go through called the hero's journey, if you like. At the start, it's all about you, and your definition of success is about being successful. Generally, you go through some sort of trauma or some setback, resilience. You learn all the hard lessons, and it's always the hard way for some reason. And then you get to the end, and you realise that it's not just about you. Actually, everything you're doing and going into the dark spaces, the grit is for impact.
Yeah, definitely.
And our final question is, who is Beth Mooney at her best?
Beth Mooney at her best is probably someone that's approachable and genuine and caring. You're not gonna get a dishonest answer from me. You're gonna probably get hit between the eyes a little bit with the truth, but it'd be truth with a bit of care as well. So for me, it's about making sure I'm as genuine as I can be and not doing things for the sake of it. So, yeah.
Beautiful. Well, Moons, I can 100% agree that it's that grit, that honesty, that truth that's made you who you are. And as I mentioned earlier, I've loved watching you progress through as a young batter that hit in the most awkwardly weird areas, but still somehow made runs and frustrated the living daylights out of us, to who you are now. Probably still doing the same thing, but have expanded the game and, more importantly, expanded yourself and grown incredibly amount. So it's really great to have you on, and thank you for your time.
No, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Bobby. Appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in. If you want to continue to be part of the Inside Edge project, hit subscribe or leave a comment below. We're also on all major social media platforms. I look forward to having you along next time.